Welcome, friends, to a tale as old as time, but with a twist. Imagine a beautiful hillside bathed in the warm glow of the afternoon sun. Here, a wise teacher, Jesus, shared profound words, captivating hearts and minds. But as the day wore on, more and more people arrived, drawn by his wisdom and presence. The disciples, ever practical, began to notice a slight problem. A very, very large problem. They tried to count, discreetly of course, but the numbers kept climbing, and their faces grew longer. One disciple, in his frantic counting, even stumbled over another, creating a small, comical pile-up. The sun began its slow descent, casting long shadows, and with it a new kind of hunger began to stir. Not just for wisdom, but for something a little more substantial, like actual food. The disciples knew they had a situation on their hands. A very hungry, very large situation. How would they feed so many? The answer, they soon realized, was not going to be simple. As twilight approached, the disciples, looking utterly stressed, finally approached Jesus. They suggested sending everyone home, but Jesus had a different idea. "You give them something to eat," he said. The disciples exchanged bewildered glances. "But Lord, we have nothing," one exclaimed. Philip, ever the pragmatist, began to calculate the impossible cost. 200 denarii wouldn't even buy enough. Meanwhile, hungry faces filled the crowd. Children rubbed their bellies, their patience wearing thin. Then Andrew sheepishly stepped forward, a small boy by his side. "There is a lad here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish," Andrew finished, looking utterly defeated. The other disciples reacted with disbelief. Exaggerated sighs filled the air, some even face-palming. 5 loaves and 2 fish, scoffed one. "That's barely enough for a snack for one person." Another disciple muttered, "Perhaps we should just tell everyone it's a fasting retreat." The boy, however, stood tall, his small offering the only hope in a sea of hungry faces. Jesus, with a calm smile, took the meager meal from the boy's hands. He looked up to heaven, his gaze filled with faith, and blessed the humble offering. The disciples watched, skeptical, exchanging glances. One even tried to sneak a bite of a fish. The boy, meanwhile, looked proud, but also a bit confused by all the fuss. Jesus then instructed the disciples, "Have the people sit down in groups of about 50. The disciples, still scratching their heads, began to organize the vast crowd into orderly rows. Then came the moment of truth. Jesus broke the bread and fish and handed them to the disciples. They started with the small basket, expecting it to run out immediately. But it didn't. Comedic chaos ensued. Disciples juggled loaves and fish, nearly dropping them, their eyes wide with disbelief. They tripped over each other, trying to keep up with the multiplying food, a whirlwind of bread and fish. The crowd's reactions were priceless. Initial surprise, then pure joy, then comical attempts to catch flying food. One disciple, thinking he was clever, tried to hide a particularly large fish for himself, but to his astonishment, it multiplied in his hands, spilling out for all to see. Children in the crowd were absolutely delighted, laughing and reaching for the endless supply of food. The disciples, now covered in crumbs and fish scales, continued their frantic distribution. The air was filled with the sounds of happy munching and astonished murmurs. Everyone ate until they were full, and still the food kept coming, a true feast of abundance. Finally, with every belly satisfied, Jesus instructed the disciples to gather the leftovers. The disciples, now exhausted but utterly amazed, began collecting the fragments. To their astonishment, they filled 12 overflowing baskets with the remaining food. A comedic struggle ensued as they tried to carry the heavy, overflowing baskets. Some nearly lost their balance, their faces strained with effort and disbelief. The boy, who had offered his small meal, watched utterly astonished and beaming with pride. Jesus smiled gently at the disciples, who were now looking sheepish but completely awestruck. They looked at the overflowing baskets, then at each other, shaking their heads in disbelief and wonder. A truly miraculous meal, proving that with faith, even the smallest offering can feed thousands.